The gunshot echoed across the dusty main street of Fort Laramie, Wyoming, in 1876, sending Sophia Sinclair diving behind a water trough as splinters flew from the wooden post where her head had been just seconds before. This wasn't the life she'd envisioned when she'd left Philadelphia 3 months ago, but here she was, caught in the crossfire of someone else's fight again. Blood trickled down her arm from where a bullet had grazed her, the white sleeve of her once fine dress now stained crimson. Sophia pressed herself against the rough wood of the trough, her heart hammering against her ribs as more shots rang out. She had come west after her father's death, following his enigmatic last letter about a property he'd purchased in Wyoming territory. What she'd found instead was a claim jumper occupying her father's land, and a town that seemed to have little interest in justice for a woman alone. "Stay down, madam," a deep voice commanded as a tall figure dropped beside her, the smell of leather and gunpowder surrounding him like a cloud. Sophia turned to see a man with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. He wore a dusty duster and a Stetson pulled low over his brow, with a star pinned to his vest that identified him as the town marshal. "Marshal Owens," she breathed, recognizing him from her failed attempts to petition the town council for help with her land dispute. "Flynn Owens," he corrected, quickly checking the chambers of his Colt revolver. "And you're the Sinclair woman who's been stirring up trouble with Rance Holderman." "He stole my father's land," she said through gritted teeth. The marshal eyed her bleeding arm. "You're hurt. It's nothing." Another shot splintered the edge of the water trough, sending Sophia flinching closer to the marshal. "We need to move," Flynn said, his eyes scanning the street. "When I say now, run for that alley." He nodded toward a narrow passage between the general store and the assayer's office. "Ready." Sophia nodded, though fear had frozen her limbs. Her legs felt like lead beneath her skirts. "Now." Flynn commanded, standing to fire 2 quick shots in the direction of their attacker. Sophia tried to rise, but her knees buckled beneath her. The events of the past 3 months, the journey west, discovering her inheritance stolen, the constant threats, the sleepless nights in a run-down hotel room had drained her completely. "I can't," she whispered, shame burning her cheeks. Flynn dropped back down beside her, bullets kicking up dust mere feet away. "What do you mean you can't?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I'm not strong enough," she confessed. The cowboy's eyes softened momentarily before hardening with resolve. "You've survived this long, haven't you?" he said, his voice firm but not unkind. "That takes a kind of strength most men don't have." Before she could respond, Flynn had holstered his gun and scooped her into his arms in one fluid motion. He sprinted across the street, shielding her body with his own as bullets whizzed past them. They tumbled into the alley, Flynn twisting to take the brunt of the fall as they crashed against the hard, packed earth. For a moment they lay there, Sophia atop the marshal, both breathing hard. His arms remained firmly around her, and she could feel the solid thud of his heart against her cheek. "You all right?" he asked, his breath warm against her hair. Sophia nodded, suddenly aware of their compromising position. She pushed herself up, wincing at the pain in her arm. Flynn rose quickly, helping her to her feet before drawing his gun again and peering cautiously around the corner. "Looks like he's gone. Probably one of Holderman's men trying to scare you off for good." "It's working," Sophia admitted bitterly. "I have nowhere to go, no money left, and now they're shooting at me in broad daylight." The marshal studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Come with me," he finally said. "We need to get that arm looked at, and then we're going to have a serious conversation about what you're doing in my town." "Your town?" Sophia bristled despite her exhaustion. A ghost of a smile touched Flynn's lips. "Yes, madam, my town." and I don't take kindly to people shooting up the streets, nor to land grabbers like Holderman. Now, are you coming? Or would you rather stay here and wait for his men to circle back?" Sophia hesitated only a moment before falling into step beside the marshal. Whatever his intentions, Marshal Flynn Owens represented her first glimmer of hope in months. Even if that hope came with a pair of storm-gray eyes that seemed to see right through her carefully constructed facade of courage. Flynn led her down the alley and through a back entrance of what turned out to be the marshal's office. A small, sparsely furnished room with a desk, a gun rack, and 2 cells with iron bars greeted them. A pot-bellied stove stood cold in the corner, and a coffee pot sat on a small table beside it. "Sit," Flynn instructed, gesturing to a wooden chair beside the desk. He rummaged in a cabinet and returned with a bottle of whiskey, clean cloths, and bandages. "I can manage," Sophia said, reaching for the supplies. "I'm sure you can," Flynn replied, not relinquishing them. "But humor me. I've patched up more bullet wounds than I care to remember." Too tired to argue, Sophia allowed him to roll up her sleeve. His touch was surprisingly gentle for hands so large and calloused. She winced as he poured whiskey over the wound. "Sorry," he murmured. "Better than gangrene, though." As he worked, Sophia studied him. Flynn Owens was older than she'd first thought, perhaps in his early 30s, with streaks of silver at his temples that caught the light from the window. Lines fanned from the corners of his eyes, speaking of years spent squinting into the sun. His face was all angles and planes, as if carved from the Wyoming landscape itself. "How did you come to be in Fort Laramie, Miss Sinclair?" Flynn asked as he wrapped a clean bandage around her arm. "My father died 6 months ago," she explained, watching his deft movements. "He was a banker in Philadelphia. Among his papers, I found deeds to a property here, a ranch he'd apparently purchased years ago as an investment. There was a letter saying he'd meant it to be my inheritance." Flynn tied off the bandage, and Holderman was already there when I arrived. "Claims he bought it from someone named Jenkins 3 years ago, but my father's deed is dated 5 years back." "Jenkins never owned that land," Flynn said grimly. "He was a land office clerk who sold falsified deeds to unsuspecting Easterners. And locals like Holderman who knew exactly what they were buying." Sophia's eyes widened. "So my father's claim is legitimate. If the deed is properly filed, yes. But Holderman has been building his empire for years, buying up all the good water rights. He won't give up that land easily." "I've tried everything," Sophia said, fatigue evident in her voice. "I've petitioned the land office, hired a lawyer who took my last $50 and disappeared, even approached the town council, which is dominated by men who owe Holderman money or favors," Flynn finished for her. He sat on the edge of his desk, arms crossed. "What were you planning to do with the land, anyway? You don't strike me as the ranching type." Sophia straightened her spine. "My father believed in the future of this territory. He thought the railroad would bring opportunity. I may not know much about cattle or horses, Marshal Owens, but I know business. My father taught me well." Flynn studied her for a long moment. "And now you're out of money, staying in that flea trap they call a hotel, and Holderman's men are taking shots at you. What's your plan now?" "I don't have one," Sophia admitted, the fight draining out of her. "But that land is all I have left of my father. I can't just give it up." Flynn sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You need to stay somewhere safe until we figure this out. Holderman isn't known for giving up, and now that they've escalated to shooting, it's only going to get worse." "We," Sophia echoed, looking up at him with surprise. "Like I said, this is my town," Flynn said simply. "And Rance Holderman has been a thorn in my side for years. If your claim is legitimate, I'll help you prove it." "Why would you help me?" Flynn's expression darkened. Let's just say I have my reasons for wanting to see Holderman knock down a peg. Now, gather your things from the hotel. You can stay at my sister's boarding house. Holderman's men won't dare cross Mabel. She's the best shot in the territory and makes no secret of it. Sophia shook her head. I can't pay for board. You can help Mabel with the cooking and cleaning. She's been looking for help anyway. Flynn stood. I'll escort you to get your things. Sophia rose as well, swaying slightly as exhaustion and relief flooded through her. Flynn caught her elbow to steady her, and the warmth of his hand seeped through the fabric of her sleeve. Thank you, she said quietly, meeting his gaze. Something flickered in his stormy eyes, something that made her heart skip a beat. Don't thank me yet, Miss Sinclair. This fight is just beginning. Sophia lifted her chin. Sophia, she corrected. If we're going to battle Rance Holderman together, you might as well use my given name. A smile tugged at the corner of Flynn's mouth. Sophia, then. He reached for his hat and placed it on his head. Let's get your things before Holderman decides to try again. The walk to the hotel was tense, with Flynn's hand never straying far from his holstered revolver. Sophia was acutely aware of eyes watching them from doorways and windows. Fort Laramie wasn't large, and news traveled fast. By now, everyone would know about the shootout. The hotel was indeed a flea trap, as Flynn had called it, a two-story building with peeling paint and sagging steps. Inside, the lobby smelled of stale beer and unwashed bodies. The clerk barely looked up as they passed, too engrossed in a dog-eared dime novel to care. Sophia's room was small and sparsely furnished, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a battered trunk for her belongings. It took only minutes to pack her few remaining possessions: 2 dresses, undergarments, a hairbrush, and her father's pocket watch and wedding ring. At the bottom of her trunk lay the deed to the ranch and her father's last letter. She carefully placed these in her reticule, unwilling to let them out of her possession. That's everything? Flynn asked, eyeing the small bundle of her belongings. Sophia nodded, a flush of embarrassment warming her cheeks. I sold most of my things to pay for the journey west. What remained went to hotel rooms and that useless lawyer. Flynn took the bundle from her without comment, but Sophia didn't miss the tightening of his jaw. They descended the stairs in silence, Sophia following Flynn's broad shoulders through the dingy lobby and back into the harsh Wyoming sunlight. Mabel Owens's boarding house stood in stark contrast to the hotel. The 2-story white clapboard building with its neat picket fence and window boxes bursting with hardy prairie flowers looked like it had been transplanted from some eastern town. A hand-painted sign reading Owens Boarding House Clean Beds, Good Food, No Trouble, hung beside the front door. As they approached, the door flew open, and a woman who could only be Flynn's sister emerged. She was tall and lean like her brother, with the same storm-gray eyes, though her hair was a rich auburn rather than Flynn's darker brown. She wore a practical blue dress with an apron tied around her waist, and a shotgun rested casually in the crook of her arm. "About time you showed up," Mabel called. "Mrs. Patterson told me you were in a shootout on Main Street." Her sharp gaze took in Sophia's bandaged arm and blood-stained sleeve. "I see she wasn't exaggerating for once." "Mabel, this is Sophia Sinclair," Flynn said. "She needs a place to stay." Mabel's eyebrow arched. "The woman claiming Holderman's water rights. No wonder someone's shooting at you." Despite her words, she stepped aside, gesturing them in. "Well, come on then. No sense standing out here where Holderman's boys can take another shot." The interior of the boarding house was as neat and welcoming as the exterior. The front parlor held comfortable-looking furniture, and the scent of freshly baked bread wafted from what Sophia presumed was the kitchen. "I can't pay," Sophia blurted out as the door closed behind them. but Marshal Owens said you might need help with cooking and cleaning." Mabel shot her brother a look. Did he now? She studied Sophia for a moment, taking in her fine, if travel-worn, clothes and her educated accent. "Ever cooked on a wood stove before?" "No," Sophia admitted, "but I'm a quick learner, scrubbed floors, changed bedding for 6 rooms. Hauled water and chopped vegetables for 20 hungry miners and cowboys." Sophia squared her shoulders. "I can learn." Mabel's stern expression softened slightly. "Well, at least you're honest. Most Eastern ladies would lie through their teeth and then faint at the first sign of real work." She propped her shotgun in the corner. "Flynn, take Miss Sinclair's things to the blue room upstairs. It's the only one empty at the moment." As Flynn headed up the stairs with her bundle, Mabel gestured for Sophia to follow her to the kitchen. "You'll start by helping me with supper. I've got 12 boarders at present, plus whatever strays come in for a meal." She eyed Sophia's dress. "You'll need different clothes. Can't work in that fancy get-up. I've got an old dress might fit you well enough until you can make yourself something practical." The kitchen was large and well organized, with a massive wood stove dominating one wall and a long work table in the center. Pots bubbled on the stove, filling the room with the rich aroma of beef stew. "Roll up your sleeves or what's left of them and start peeling those potatoes," Mabel instructed, pointing to a basket on the table. "Flynn can explain your situation while we work." Flynn entered the kitchen as Sophia was awkwardly attempting to peel her first potato. He took one look at her struggle and shook his head, the ghost of a smile playing at his lips. "Hold it like this," he demonstrated, taking another potato and a knife. His hands dwarfed the vegetable as he quickly and efficiently removed the skin in one long spiral. "Keeps more of the potato and less in the peelings." Sophia tried to mimic his technique, but her movements were clumsy. Flynn watched her for a moment before stepping behind her, his arms encircling her as he guided her hands. "Like this," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. Sophia was suddenly very aware of his proximity, the solid warmth of his chest against her back, the slight roughness of his calloused hands over hers. Something fluttered in her stomach that had nothing to do with hunger or fear. Mabel cleared her throat, and Flynn stepped back abruptly. "She'll get the hang of it," he said, moving to pour himself a cup of coffee from the pot on the stove. Sophia focused intently on the potato in her hands, willing the flush to recede from her cheeks. "So," Mabel said, stirring the stew with more vigor than necessary, "tell me about this land dispute that's got Holderman's men taking shots at you in broad daylight." Between them, Flynn and Sophia explained the situation with the ranch and the disputed water rights. As they talked, Sophia continued peeling potatoes, gradually improving her technique. "That water source is key to controlling the whole southeastern range," Mabel said when they finished. "No wonder Holderman's so desperate to keep it. Without water, none of the surrounding land is worth much." "Exactly," Flynn agreed. "And if Sophia's deed is legitimate, she could break Holderman's stranglehold on the small ranchers in the area, which makes her very popular with some folks and very unpopular with others," Mabel observed. She turned to Sophia. "You understand what you're getting into. Holderman isn't just some land grabber. He's got half the territory in his pocket, including Judge Weathers." Sophia set down her knife. "It was my father's dream to be part of building something out here. He believed in the future of the West. I can't just walk away from that." "Even if it gets you killed?" Mabel asked bluntly. "Mabel," Flynn warned. "She needs to understand the stakes, Flynn," Mabel shot back. "This isn't Philadelphia, where disputes get settled in courtrooms with fancy lawyers. Out here, they often end with someone in a pine box." "I understand the risks," Sophia said quietly, "but that land is all I have left. Without it, I have nothing, no future, no home, nothing." The siblings exchanged a look that Sophia couldn't interpret. Finally, Flynn sighed. "I'll ride out to the territorial capital next week to check the land office records. If your deed is properly registered, we'll have legal ground to stand on. Until then, you stay here where it's safe. And learn to be useful," Mabel added, but her tone had softened. "Now finish those potatoes. We've got hungry men coming in an hour, and nothing makes them crankier than late supper." The next few days fell into a routine that left Sophia exhausted but oddly satisfied. She rose before dawn to help Mabel prepare breakfast for the boarders, a rowdy but respectful group of miners, cowboys, and a traveling salesman. She learned to navigate the temperamental wood stove, to make biscuits that didn't resemble hockey pucks, and to brew coffee strong enough to satisfy the most demanding cowhand. Between meals, she scrubbed floors, changed bedding, washed endless piles of dishes, and helped with the laundry, a backbreaking task involving a washboard, lye soap, and more hot water than she'd imagined possible. By the end of each day, her hands were red and chapped, her back ached, and she fell into bed too tired even to dream. But with each passing day, the work became easier as her body grew stronger and her skills improved. Flynn came by each evening, ostensibly to check on her safety but lingering to share supper and, increasingly, to help with whatever tasks remained. Sophia found herself looking forward to these quiet evenings when the three of them would sit in the kitchen after the boarders had retired, drinking coffee and talking. She learned that Flynn had come west after the war between the states, seeking to leave behind the horrors he'd witnessed as a Union soldier. He'd started as a deputy in Cheyenne, before moving to Fort Laramie 5 years ago when the previous marshal had been killed in a bank robbery. Mabel had followed her brother west after her husband died of pneumonia, leaving her a childless widow at 25. She'd used the money from selling their Pennsylvania farm to buy the boarding house, transforming it from a run-down flophouse to the respectable establishment it was now. In turn, Sophia told them about her life in Philadelphia, about her father's banking business, and her mother who had died when Sophia was just 12. She spoke of her father's dream of the West, a place he'd visited only once but had spoken of constantly in his final years. "He always planned to come out here when he retired," she explained one evening as they sat around the kitchen table. "He talked about building a ranch house on a hill overlooking the valley. He had it all planned where the barns would go, the corrals, even a garden for my mother, though she'd been gone for years by then." "Why didn't he come?" Mabel asked, her usual briskness softened by the late hour and the intimacy of their conversation. Sophia traced the rim of her coffee cup with her finger. "He kept putting it off. Always one more deal to close, one more client to satisfy. Then last winter he caught a chill that settled in his lungs. By spring he was gone." She looked up, meeting Flynn's steady gaze. "His last words to me were, 'Don't wait for someday, Sophia. Someday never comes.'" Flynn reached across the table, his hand covering hers briefly. "He'd be proud of you," he said, his voice gruff with an emotion Sophia couldn't quite name. The moment hung between them, charged with something that made Sophia's heart beat faster. Then Flynn withdrew his hand and stood. "I should go. Early start tomorrow." "The territorial capital?" Sophia asked, trying to keep the disappointment from her voice. Flynn nodded. "I'll be gone 3 days, maybe 4. Mabel, keep that shotgun handy." "Always do," Mabel replied, rising to walk him to the door. Sophia remained at the table, her hand still warm where Flynn's had rested. She was in dangerous territory, she knew. Developing feelings for the marshal was foolish. Once her land situation was resolved one way or another, she would need to focus on building a life here. That life might not include Flynn Owens. Yet as she heard his deep voice bidding Mabel good night, Sophia couldn't deny the flutter in her chest, or the way her thoughts increasingly turned to him throughout her busy days. The morning Flynn left for the territorial capital dawned clear and cool. Sophia rose especially early to pack him food for the journey: biscuits, jerky, and a jar of Mabel's applesauce that he'd mentioned liking. He seemed surprised by the package, his fingers brushing hers as he took it. "Thank you," he said, something soft in his eyes that made Sophia's breath catch. "Be careful," she replied, suddenly fearful for him on the long journey. "Always am." He tipped his hat and mounted his horse, a sturdy roan gelding. "Stay close to the boarding house. Holderman's been quiet, but that doesn't mean he's given up." Sophia nodded, watching as he rode down the street, his broad shoulders straight and proud in the saddle. "He'll be fine," Mabel said beside her. "Flynn's been riding these territories for years, knows every trail and water hole between here and Cheyenne." "I know," Sophia said, though the knot of worry in her stomach didn't ease. "It's just, you care for him," Mabel finished for her. It wasn't a question. Sophia turned to her, ready to deny it, but Mabel's knowing gaze stopped her. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's known Flynn his whole life," Mabel replied with a rare smile, "and who sees the way he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching." Hope bloomed in Sophia's chest. "How does he look at me?" "Like a man who's found something he thought was lost forever." Mabel's expression grew serious. "My brother doesn't give his heart easily, Sophia. The war took something from him, a belief in goodness, maybe. But since you arrived, I've seen glimpses of the Flynn I knew before he went east to fight." Before Sophia could respond, one of the boarders called from inside, complaining about the coffee being cold. Mabel rolled her eyes. "Duty calls. Don't worry about Flynn. Worry about yourself. Holderman's not the type to forget a grudge." The warning proved prophetic. That very afternoon, as Sophia was hanging laundry in the backyard, a man appeared at the gate, a tall, broad-shouldered figure in an expensive suit and hat. "Miss Sinclair," he called, his voice smooth as oiled leather. "Might I have a word?" Sophia froze, a wet sheet clutched in her hands. She knew without being told that this was Rance Holderman himself. Something about his bearing, the way he owned the space around him, the confident set of his shoulders spoke of a man accustomed to power. "Mr. Holderman," she acknowledged, forcing her voice to remain steady. "What brings you to the boarding house?" He removed his hat, revealing silvering hair and a face that might have been handsome if not for the coldness in his pale blue eyes. "I thought it was time we met face to face instead of through intermediaries. May I come in?" Sophia glanced toward the house, wishing Mabel wasn't in town buying supplies. "I think we can speak well enough from where we are." Holderman smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "As you wish." He hooked his thumbs in his vest pockets. "I understand you believe you have a claim to my ranch on the southwestern range." "I don't believe, Mr. Holderman. I know. I have the deed, properly signed and witnessed." "A deed to land sold fraudulently by a man who never owned it," Holderman countered smoothly. "Such a shame your father was taken in by such a scheme." "Marshal Owens seems to think my claim is legitimate," Sophia replied, carefully pinning the sheet to the line to hide her trembling hands. "Ah, yes, Marshal Owens." Holderman's tone hardened slightly. "A man with his own interests in the matter. I wouldn't put too much faith in his objectivity, Miss Sinclair." Sophia turned to face him fully. "What do you want, Mr. Holderman?" "To make you an offer. A generous one, considering the circumstances." He named a sum that made Sophia's eyes widen despite herself. It was 3 times what her father had paid for the land, enough to start a new life anywhere she chose. In exchange for my claim to the ranch, she clarified. Exactly. You get a tidy profit and I avoid the inconvenience of a prolonged dispute. He spread his hands. It seems the most civilized solution, doesn't it? For a moment, Sophia was tempted. The money would secure her future, free her from dependence on the Owens' charity. She could buy a small business in town, perhaps, or even return east with enough to re-establish herself. But then she thought of her father's dream, of Flynn riding to the territorial capital on her behalf, of the hard work she'd put in these past days to build a new life for herself. "Thank you for your offer, Mr. Holderman," she said, lifting her chin, "but I must decline. That land was my father's legacy to me, and I intend to honor it." Holderman's pleasant expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "I admire your spirit, Miss Sinclair, but Wyoming is a harsh place for a woman alone. Accidents happen, fires start, people disappear." The threat hung in the air between them, all the more menacing for its casual delivery. "Are you threatening me, Mr. Holderman?" Sophia asked, proud that her voice remained steady. "Merely stating facts, my dear." He replaced his hat. "Think on my offer. It stands for 1 week. After that—" He shrugged eloquently. "Good day, Mr. Holderman," Sophia said firmly, turning back to her laundry. "Good day, Miss Sinclair. Give my regards to Marshal Owens when he returns." Holderman's boots crunched on the gravel path as he walked away. Only when he was out of sight did Sophia allow herself to sink onto a nearby bench, her legs suddenly too weak to support her. The implied threat in Holderman's words was clear, as was his knowledge of Flynn's absence. He'd been watching, waiting for an opportunity to approach her when she was alone. When Mabel returned an hour later, Sophia recounted the visit. Mabel's face grew progressively darker as she listened. "That snake," she spat when Sophia finished. "Coming here to my home with his thinly veiled threats. I ought to report him to," she broke off, remembering that the law in Fort Laramie was currently 3 days' ride away. "He knows Flynn is gone," Sophia said quietly, "which means he's been watching us." Mabel's expression hardened with resolve. "Then we'll be ready for whatever he plans next." "Bart," she called, and one of the boarders, a grizzled old miner, appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Ride out to the Reeves place. Tell Sam I need him and his boys to stay here for a few days. Tell him it's about Holderman." Bart nodded without question and disappeared to do her bidding. "Sam Reeves owns the small ranch adjoining Holderman's," Mabel explained. "They've been at odds for years over water rights. Sam will be more than happy to help thwart whatever Holderman has planned." By nightfall, Sam Reeves and his 3 grown sons had arrived, bringing bedrolls and rifles. They set up in the parlor, transforming the genteel boarding house into something resembling a fort. 2 more men arrived shortly after neighboring ranchers with their own grievances against Holderman, eager to stand against the man who had been squeezing them out for years. Sophia was touched by the show of support, but it also underscored the danger she was in. These men wouldn't have come armed if they didn't believe Holderman's threat was real. That night, as she lay in her narrow bed listening to the murmur of voices from below, Sophia found herself wishing desperately for Flynn's return. Not just for the protection he represented, but for the comfort of his presence, the steadiness in his storm-gray eyes. "I'm not strong enough for this," she whispered into the darkness, allowing herself a moment of vulnerability that she refused to show to others. But then she remembered Flynn's words on that first day. "You've survived this long, haven't you?" And she had. She'd survived her mother's death, her father's passing, the journey west, the discovery of her stolen inheritance. She'd learned to cook on a wood stove, to scrub floors until her hands bled, to face down Rance Holderman in her own backyard. Perhaps she was stronger than she knew. With that thought, Sophia finally drifted into a fitful sleep, one hand curled around her father's pocket watch beneath her pillow. The attack came just before dawn, when the sky was still dark and most of the house was asleep. Sophia woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of shouting. For a disoriented moment, she thought she was back in Philadelphia in her father's house before reality crashed in. She threw off her blankets and grabbed her robe, heart pounding. Smoke was seeping under her door, and she could hear Mabel's voice calling orders somewhere below. Sophia opened her door to find the hallway hazy with smoke. She pulled her robe tight around her nightgown and hurried toward the stairs, coughing as the smoke thickened. Downstairs was chaos. Reeves and his sons were passing buckets of water through the front door, while Mabel directed two boarders who were beating at flames, licking up the parlor curtains with wet blankets. "What happened?" Sophia gasped, joining the bucket line. "Torches through the windows," Mabel answered grimly, her face streaked with soot. "Shots fired too." Sam's youngest took one in the arm. Horror and guilt washed over Sophia. People were being hurt because of her. "This is my fault," she said, her voice breaking. "No," Mabel said fiercely. "This is Holderman's fault. He's the one who chose violence." It took nearly an hour to extinguish the flames. By then, the parlor was badly damaged, with smoke staining the ceiling and water soaking the rugs. Young Jamie Reeves sat at the kitchen table while his father carefully extracted a bullet from his upper arm. The dawn light revealed more destruction outside. Two of the front windows were broken, the flower boxes beneath them smashed. Bullet holes pocked the white clapboard siding, and the front gate hung drunkenly from one hinge. "They'll be back," Sam Reeves said grimly as they surveyed the damage. "This was just a warning shot." "Next time they'll come in force," one of his sons agreed. Mabel squared her shoulders. "Then we'd better be ready." The rest of the day was spent preparing for another attack. The men repaired what damage they could, boarding up the broken windows and reinforcing the doors. Mabel set Sophia and the other women to making bandages and preparing food that could be eaten cold, in case they lost the use of the stove. As darkness fell, everyone took up positions throughout the house. Sophia found herself stationed in the kitchen with Mabel and Sarah, the washerwoman who sometimes helped at the boarding house. Each woman had a rifle, though Sophia had only the vaguest idea how to use hers. "Aim and pull the trigger," Mabel instructed when Sophia admitted her inexperience. "And pray you hit something other than one of our defenders." The night stretched endlessly, each creak and rustle outside setting Sophia's nerves on edge. By midnight, her eyes burned with fatigue, but she refused to relinquish her post. These people were risking their lives for her. The least she could do was stay awake. Dawn came without an attack, much to everyone's surprise. Sam sent one of his sons to scout the area, and he returned with puzzling news. "Holderman's men are gone," he reported. "The saloon keeper says they rode out last night, heading east in a hurry." "East," Mabel repeated, frowning. "That's the direction of the territorial capital," Sophia finished, a chill running through her. "Where Flynn went." Sam and Mabel exchanged alarmed looks. "They're going after Flynn," Sam said, voicing what they all feared. "They know he's searching the land records. If they find proof that Sophia's claim is legitimate, they'll destroy it," Mabel added, "and Flynn with it." "We have to warn him," Sophia said urgently. "He's 3 days ahead of them," Sam pointed out. "With luck, he's already found what he needed and is on his way back." But Sophia couldn't shake the fear that gripped her. Flynn was alone, possibly with documents that could ruin Holderman. The rancher had already proven he was willing to resort to violence. "I'm going after him," she announced, startling even herself with the decision. "That's madness," Mabel protested. "You don't know the way, can barely ride. I'll take her," Sam interrupted, surprising them all. "My boys can stay here to protect the house. Miss Sinclair's right, someone needs to warn the marshal, and I know the trail to Cheyenne better than most." Sophia shot him a grateful look. "Thank you, Mr. Reeves." Mabel looked like she wanted to object further but finally nodded. "You'll need supplies, and different clothes. You can't ride all that way in a dress." Within the hour, Sophia found herself dressed in a pair of trousers and a shirt borrowed from Jamie Reeves, who was closest to her size. She felt scandalously improper, but had to admit the practicality of the clothing for their journey. Sam had saddled 2 horses, his own bay gelding and a steady-looking mare for Sophia. "She's gentle," he assured her as he helped her mount. "Just follow my lead and tell me if you need to rest." Mabel pressed a package of food into Sophia's hands. "Be careful," she said, her usual brusqueness softened by concern, "and bring my fool brother back in one piece." Sophia nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. She was terrified of the journey ahead, of what they might find at the end of it, of the possibility that they might be too late. But beneath the fear was a steely determination. Flynn had risked his life to help her. She wouldn't abandon him now. As they rode out of Fort Laramie, Sophia cast one last look at the boarding house with its boarded windows and bullet-scarred walls. Whatever happened, she knew her life had irrevocably changed since she'd first stepped off the stagecoach in this dusty Wyoming town. She only hoped she would have the chance to return with Flynn beside her. The journey to Cheyenne was grueling. Despite Sam's patient guidance, Sophia was saddle-sore and exhausted by the end of the first day. They made camp in a small grove of cottonwoods beside a creek, and Sophia nearly wept with relief when she dismounted, her legs trembling beneath her. Sam proved to be a taciturn but considerate traveling companion. He built a small fire, prepared a simple meal of beans and jerky, and discreetly turned his back while Sophia washed in the creek. He spoke little but listened attentively when Sophia, driven by nervous energy, told him about her father and the dream that had brought her west. "Your pa had good instincts," Sam said as they sat beside the fire. "That land you're claiming has the best water rights in the territory. Holderman knows it too, which is why he'll fight to keep it. Have you known Holderman long?" Sophia asked, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders against the evening chill. Sam's weathered face hardened. 20 years. We came west together, part of the same wagon train from Missouri. He was different then, ambitious but not cruel. Success changed him. Or maybe it just revealed what was always there. What happened between you?" Sam poked at the fire, sending sparks spiraling upward. "My ranch adjoins his. There's a creek runs through both properties. Years back, during a dry spell, he dammed it up on his side, nearly ruined me. When I confronted him, he offered to buy me out for a pittance. But you didn't sell." "No," Sam said, a hint of pride in his voice. "I dug wells, hauled water, kept my cattle alive through that drought, been fighting him ever since." "And Flynn?" Sophia asked hesitantly. Holderman mentioned that the marshal had his own interests in their dispute. Sam was quiet for so long that Sophia thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he sighed. "That's the marshal's story to tell, not mine. But I will say this: Holderman has taken something from nearly everyone in Fort Laramie, one way or another." They lapsed into silence after that, each lost in their own thoughts. Sophia wondered what Holderman had taken from Flynn, what personal grudge lay beneath his professional determination to uphold the law. Whatever it was, it had created a darkness in him that she'd glimpsed occasionally, a shadow behind his storm-gray eyes. The second day of travel was harder than the first. Rain came in the early morning hours, turning the trail to mud that sucked at the horses' hooves. Sophia's muscles screamed with every movement, and she found herself gritting her teeth against the pain. Sam watched her with concern. "We can rest longer," he offered during their midday stop. Sophia shook her head. "No, Holderman's men have a full day's lead on us. We need to keep moving." By the third day, Sophia had found a rhythm to the riding, her body adapting to the unfamiliar motion. The landscape had changed, the flat plains giving way to rolling hills covered with sage and scrub oak. In the distance, the hazy outline of mountains was visible against the horizon. "We should reach Cheyenne by nightfall," Sam told her as they broke camp. If the marshal found what he was looking for, he might already be on his way back. "Then we might pass him on the trail," Sophia said, hope rising in her chest. Sam nodded. "Keep your eyes sharp." But the day wore on with no sign of Flynn. They passed a few travelers, a freight wagon heading west, a pair of soldiers returning to Fort Laramie, a family in a farm wagon but not the marshal. Cheyenne appeared as the sun was setting, a sprawl of buildings nestled in a valley below them. It was larger than Fort Laramie, with more substantial structures and a proper main street lined with businesses. The territorial capitol building stood at the far end, its white stone walls gleaming in the last rays of sunlight. Where would Flynn stay? Sophia asked as they rode into town. "The Western Hotel, most likely," Sam replied. "It's where most territorial officials stay when they are in town." The Western Hotel proved to be a 3-story brick building near the Capitol. Sophia felt acutely conscious of her borrowed men's clothing and travel-worn appearance as they entered the lobby, but her concern for Flynn overrode her embarrassment. The clerk behind the desk eyed them suspiciously. "Can I help you?" "We're looking for Marshal Flynn Owens from Fort Laramie," Sam said. "Is he staying here?" The clerk consulted his register. "He was, checked out yesterday morning." Sophia's heart sank. "Did he say where he was going?" "Back to Fort Laramie, I'd imagine," the clerk replied with a shrug. "He seemed in a hurry. Left before dawn." Sam and Sophia exchanged worried looks. If Flynn had left yesterday morning, they should have encountered him on the trail. "Did he receive any visitors while he was here?" Sam pressed. The clerk thought for a moment. "A few territorial officials. And a man came looking for him the night before he left. Big fellow, well-dressed. Said he had an urgent message from Fort Laramie." "Holderman," Sophia whispered, dread pooling in her stomach. "Was the marshal alone when he left?" Sam asked. "Far as I know," the clerk said, looking increasingly uncomfortable with their questions. "Look, if you're friends of his, you might try the land office. He spent most of his time there." They thanked the clerk and left, stepping back onto the darkening street. "The land office will be closed now," Sam said. "We'll have to wait until morning." "What if something's happened to him?" Sophia asked, voicing her deepest fear. Sam's expression was grim. "Let's get some rooms for the night, nothing we can do until daylight." They secured 2 rooms at a smaller hotel near the edge of town, using some of the money Mabel had pressed on Sophia before they left. The accommodations were basic but clean: a narrow bed, a washstand, and a small table with a lamp. Sophia was too anxious to sleep. She paced the small room, her mind conjuring increasingly dire scenarios. Flynn ambushed on the trail, Flynn lying injured in some ravine, Flynn. She couldn't complete the thought. The idea of Flynn dead was too painful to contemplate, a sharp ache in her chest that surprised her with its intensity. When had he become so important to her? When had his safety become so entwined with her own happiness? Morning couldn't come fast enough. Sophia was waiting in the hotel lobby at dawn, having changed back into her dress for the visit to the territorial offices. Sam joined her shortly after, looking as though he'd slept as poorly as she had. The Territorial Land Office opened at 8 o'clock, a nondescript building with rows of filing cabinets visible through the windows. A harried-looking clerk greeted them, his spectacles sliding down his nose as he looked up from a stack of paperwork. "Can I help you?" "We're looking for information about Marshal Flynn Owens from Fort Laramie," Sam explained. "We understand he was here researching land records." The clerk's expression changed, becoming guarded. "Yes, he was here for several days, left with copies of the records he needed." "What records specifically?" Sophia asked, stepping forward. "I'm Sophia Sinclair. He was researching my land claim." Recognition flashed in the clerk's eyes. "Miss Sinclair, yes, the marshal mentioned you. He found your father's deed properly registered and predating the claim by Rance Holderman." Hope surged through Sophia. "So my claim is legitimate, according to our records, yes." The marshal seemed quite pleased. "When exactly did he leave?" Sam pressed. The clerk frowned. 3 days ago, early morning, said he was heading straight back to Fort Laramie. 3 days. If Flynn had left 3 days ago, he should have reached Fort Laramie by now, or they should have passed him on the trail. "Was anyone else interested in those same records?" Sam asked. The clerk hesitated. "I'm not supposed to discuss. This is important," Sophia interrupted. "Marshal Owens may be in danger." After a moment's hesitation, the clerk nodded. "There were 2 men here the day after the marshal left. Rough-looking types. They asked about the same land records, claimed they were working for Mr. Holderman. I told them the marshal had already taken copies." "How did they react?" Sam asked. "They weren't pleased," the clerk said, adjusting his spectacles nervously. "One of them said something about catching up to the marshal on the trail. I assumed they meant to deliver a message. Or ambush him," Sophia thought, fear clenching her heart. She turned to Sam. "We need to go back. Now." Sam nodded, thanking the clerk before following Sophia outside. On the street, he gripped her arm gently. "If Holderman's men caught up to Flynn on the trail, they would have done it the first day out from Cheyenne. That means we need to search the eastern route carefully." They set out within the hour, riding as fast as they dared on the muddy trail. Sam kept his eyes on the surrounding terrain, looking for any sign of disturbance or struggle. Sophia's gaze constantly scanned the horizon, hoping desperately for a glimpse of Flynn's distinctive figure on horseback. They had been riding for several hours when Sam suddenly reined in his horse. "There," he said, pointing to a narrow trail that branched off from the main road. "Looks like several horses turned off there recently." The side trail led into a grove of cottonwoods nestled in a small valley. As they approached cautiously, Sophia spotted a thin wisp of smoke rising among the trees. "Someone's camped there," she whispered. Sam nodded, his expression grim. "Stay behind me," he instructed, drawing his revolver. They dismounted and approached on foot, moving silently through the underbrush. The smell of wood smoke grew stronger, along with another scent that made Sophia's stomach turn the metallic tang of blood. The camp came into view, a small fire, a coffee pot hanging over it, and a man sitting with his back against a tree trunk. Even from a distance, Sophia recognized the broad shoulders and dark hair. "Flynn," she gasped, breaking cover to run toward him. Flynn's head snapped up at the sound of her voice, his hand immediately going to his holster. When he recognized her, his expression transformed from wariness to shock. "Sophia," he said incredulously as she reached him. "What in God's name are you doing here?" "Looking for you," she replied, dropping to her knees beside him. Now that she was closer, she could see the crude bandage wrapped around his left thigh, stained with dried blood. His face was pale beneath his tan, with lines of pain etched around his mouth. "You're hurt." "It's not as bad as it looks," Flynn said, though his grimace as he shifted belied his words. "Bullet went through clean." Sam emerged from the trees, his revolver still in hand. "Marshal," he greeted, his eyes taking in Flynn's injured leg and the signs of a struggle around the camp. Looks like you had visitors. Holderman's men, Flynn confirmed. 3 of them. They were waiting for me about a day out from Cheyenne. His gaze returned to Sophia, concern replacing pain in his eyes. Why are you here? You should be safe in Fort Laramie. Holderman attacked the boarding house, Sophia explained, helping him sit more comfortably against the tree. Then his men rode east. We knew they were coming after you. Flynn cursed softly. Anyone hurt? Jamie Reeves took a bullet in the arm, but he'll be all right, Sam answered. House got shot up some and they tried to burn it down. Anger flashed in Flynn's eyes. Mabel, she's fine, Sophia assured him. Organizing the defense like a general, she sent us to warn you. Flynn's lips quirked in a ghost of a smile. Sounds like Mabel. He reached for a saddlebag lying beside him and pulled out a packet of papers. I got what we needed. Your father's deed is legitimate, properly registered 5 years ago. Holderman's claim is based on a fraudulent deed dated later. Relief washed over Sophia. So the ranch is legally mine. Yes, Flynn confirmed. And with these documents, even Judge Weathers won't be able to rule in Holderman's favor. Sam knelt to examine Flynn's wound. What happened to Holderman's men? A grim satisfaction settled on Flynn's face. One's dead. The other 2 left with some new holes in them. They took my horse, though, which has slowed me down considerably. Can you ride? Sam asked, rewrapping the bandage around Flynn's thigh. Flynn nodded. If I have to. Been making my way back slowly, camping when I need to rest the leg. You'll ride with me, Sophia said firmly. My mare can carry both of us for a while, and we can trade off with Sam's horse. Flynn looked like he wanted to argue but finally nodded. We should move soon. Holderman's men might come back with reinforcements. They helped Flynn to his feet, his face tightening with pain as he put weight on his injured leg. Sophia slipped under his arm, supporting him as they made their way back to where they'd left the horses. It took some maneuvering to get Flynn mounted behind Sophia on her mare. His arms encircled her waist as he held on, his chest warm against her back despite the chill in the air. Thank you for coming for me, he murmured against her ear as they set out, his breath sending shivers down her spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. You'd have done the same for me, Sophia replied, hyper-aware of his proximity, of the way his thighs bracketed hers, of his strong hands resting at her waist. Yes, Flynn said simply. I would. They traveled slowly, stopping frequently to rest Flynn's leg and to allow the horses to recover. At each stop, Sophia checked Flynn's wound, cleaning it with water from their canteens and applying fresh bandages from their limited supplies. During one such stop, as Sam scouted ahead, Flynn caught Sophia's wrist as she tended to his leg. You've changed, he observed, his gray eyes studying her face. Sophia paused, aware of the warmth of his fingers around her wrist. How do you mean? When I first met you, you were ready to give up. I'm not strong enough, you said. A smile touched his lips. Now look at you riding across Wyoming in men's clothes, facing down Holderman, treating bullet wounds like a field surgeon. Heat rose in Sophia's cheeks. I remembered what you said, that I'd survived this long. I suppose I just needed to be reminded of my own strength. Flynn's smile deepened. You didn't need me to tell you that. It was always there. His thumb traced a small circle on the inside of her wrist, sending her pulse racing. I just saw it before you did. Their eyes held, the moment stretching between them like a thread of silk, delicate but unbreakable. Then Sam's return broke the spell, and Sophia gently withdrew her wrist, turning her attention back to Flynn's bandage. But something had shifted between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing since that first day behind the water trough. Sophia felt it in the way Flynn's hands lingered when he helped her mount, in the way his eyes followed her movements, in the soft timbre of his voice when he spoke her name. They made camp that night in a sheltered hollow, building a small fire and sharing the last of their provisions. Flynn's fever had risen during the day's travel, his skin hot to the touch and his eyes bright with pain. "We need to get him to a doctor," Sophia murmured to Sam as Flynn dozed fitfully by the fire. Sam nodded grimly. "If we push hard, we can reach Fort Laramie by tomorrow evening." "Will he make it that long?" Sophia's voice broke on the question, revealing the fear she'd been trying to hide. Sam placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "The marshal's tough, and he has something to live for now." His knowing gaze made Sophia blush. "I don't know what you mean," she said, not very convincingly. Sam just smiled. "Get some rest. I'll take first watch." Sophia spread her blanket near Flynn, close enough to monitor his fever but not so close as to be improper. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her. She watched the firelight play across Flynn's features, softening the hard planes of his face. Even in sleep, he looked strong, determined, a man who faced life's challenges head-on. What would it be like to have that strength beside her always? To build a life with this man who had seen her courage before she recognized it herself. The questions followed Sophia into her dreams, where Flynn stood beside her on a hill overlooking a valley, pointing out where they would build their home. They set out at dawn, Flynn's condition worse despite the night's rest. His skin burned with fever and he swayed in the saddle, staying upright only through sheer determination and Sophia's supporting arm. "Just a few more hours," she encouraged him as they paused to let him drink some water. "We'll be in Fort Laramie by sunset." Flynn nodded weakly, his eyes unfocused. "Sophia," he murmured, his voice rough. "If I don't make it, don't," she interrupted fiercely. "Don't you dare say that. You're going to be fine." A ghost of his usual smile touched his lips. "Stubborn woman," he whispered. "At least hear me out." Sophia bit her lip but nodded. Flynn reached for her hand, his grip alarmingly weak. "If something happens to me, the papers for your land are in my saddlebag. Take them to Judge Carter in South Pass City. He's honest, not in Holderman's pocket." "Nothing is going to happen to you," Sophia insisted, blinking back tears. "We're going to get you home and then we're going to deal with Holderman together." Flynn's eyes cleared momentarily, focusing on her face. "Together," he repeated softly. "I like the sound of that." Before Sophia could respond, Sam called urgently from where he was scouting ahead. "Riders coming, at least 6 of them." Flynn struggled to sit up straighter, reaching for his gun. "Holderman," Sam nodded grimly. "Looks like it, and he's got his men with him." Sophia's heart sank. They were still hours from Fort Laramie, with nowhere to hide on the open trail. Flynn was in no condition to fight, and even with Sam's help, they were badly outnumbered. "We need to make a stand," Flynn said, his marshal's instincts taking over despite his weakened state. "There's a rock outcropping about a quarter-mile back. Defensive position." Sam nodded and helped Flynn dismount while Sophia gathered their few remaining supplies. They led the horses off the trail, and toward the rocks. Flynn had mentioned a jumble of boulders that provided some cover from the approaching riders. "Get behind those rocks," Flynn instructed Sophia as Sam helped him into position. "Keep your head down." Sophia shook her head. "I can shoot," she said with more confidence than she felt. "Mabel taught me, sort of." Flynn looked like he wanted to argue but was too weak to waste the breath. Instead, he handed her his second revolver. "6 shots," he said. "Make them count." They took positions among the rocks, Sam to the left, Flynn in the center, and Sophia to the right. The approaching riders slowed as they neared the outcropping, clearly aware that their quarry had gone to ground. "Marshal Owens." Holderman's voice carried clearly across the distance between them. "I know you're there. You and the Sinclair woman." Flynn didn't respond, conserving his strength. Sam caught Sophia's eye and shook his head, warning her to stay silent as well. "This doesn't have to end badly," Holderman continued. "Just hand over the land records and we all ride away." When no response came, Holderman signaled to his men. They spread out, moving to surround the rock outcropping. Sophia's hands trembled as she gripped Flynn's revolver. This was different from the attack on the boarding house, more personal, more desperate. These men were here specifically for them. "Last chance, Marshal," Holderman called. Flynn finally responded, his voice surprisingly strong despite his condition. "You know I can't do that, Holderman. The law's the law." A harsh laugh was Holderman's only reply before he barked an order to his men. Gunfire erupted, bullets ricocheting off the rocks around them. "Stay down," Flynn shouted to Sophia as he and Sam returned fire. Sophia pressed herself against the boulder, heart pounding in her ears. The gunfire was deafening, dust and rock fragments flying with each impact. Through a gap in the rocks, she could see two of Holderman's men advancing on their position from the right. Without thinking, she raised Flynn's revolver and fired. The recoil nearly knocked the gun from her hands, but she saw one of the men stumble and fall. The second man dove for cover, firing wildly in her direction. "Sophia!" Flynn's voice was sharp with concern. "I'm all right," she called back, though her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the gun. The exchange of gunfire continued for what seemed like hours but was probably only minutes. Sam took a bullet to the shoulder but kept firing. Flynn, despite his fever, shot with deadly accuracy, dropping two more of Holderman's men. Then, just as Sophia was running out of ammunition, a new sound reached them: hoofbeats, many of them, approaching rapidly from the direction of Fort Laramie. "Riders coming," Sam shouted. Holderman heard it too. He called to his remaining men, and they fell back to their horses, preparing to retreat. But before they could mount, a group of horsemen appeared on the trail, at least a dozen men led by a familiar figure on a dappled gray horse. "Mabel," Sophia whispered in disbelief. It was indeed Mabel Owens, riding like a frontier queen at the head of what appeared to be half the male population of Fort Laramie. She carried a shotgun across her saddle, and the expression on her face would have made the devil himself think twice. "Rance Holderman." Mabel's voice rang out, carrying clearly across the distance. "Drop your weapons or prepare to meet your maker." Holderman and his remaining men found themselves caught between the rocks where Flynn, Sophia, and Sam were entrenched, and Mabel's approaching force. After a moment's hesitation, Holderman raised his hands in surrender, his men following suit. Mabel rode directly to where Holderman stood, her shotgun never wavering from his chest. "Samuel," she called, "are you alive back there?" "Alive but shot," Sam replied, emerging from behind the rocks with his arm pressed to his bleeding shoulder. "Flynn." "Sophia." "Here," Sophia called, helping Flynn to his feet. He leaned heavily against her, barely conscious now that the immediate danger had passed. Mabel took in her brother's condition with a single glance. "Dr. Wilson," she shouted, and a man separated from the group, hurrying toward them with a medical bag in hand. As the doctor examined Flynn, Mabel turned her attention back to Holderman. "You're under arrest," she informed him with grim satisfaction, "for attempted murder, arson, and whatever else we can think of between here and Fort Laramie." "You have no authority," Holderman sneered. "No, but I do," said a tall man who stepped forward from the group. He wore a badge similar to Flynn's but with U.S. Marshal engraved on it. "Marshal James Cooper, Wyoming Territory. Mrs. Owens sent for me when her brother didn't return on schedule. Seems her instincts were good." Sophia barely registered the proceedings as Holderman, and his men were disarmed and bound. Her attention was fixed on Flynn, who lay pale and still while the doctor worked on his leg. "The bullet wound is infected," Dr. Wilson said grimly. "He's lost a lot of blood and the fever's high. We need to get him back to town quickly." They fashioned a travois to transport Flynn, attaching it to Sam's horse. The journey back to Fort Laramie passed in a blur for Sophia, who rode beside Flynn, constantly checking to ensure he was still breathing. "He's strong," Mabel assured her, riding on her other side, "and stubborn. He won't leave us easily." Sophia nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. The thought of losing Flynn now, after everything they'd been through, was unbearable. In the short time she'd known him, he had become the center of her world, the fixed point around which her future revolved. She couldn't imagine that future without him in it. They reached Fort Laramie as the sun was setting, the entire town turning out to watch the procession. Flynn was carried to Dr. Wilson's office, where the doctor shooed everyone out except his assistant. "There's nothing you can do here," he told Sophia and Mabel firmly. "Go home. I'll send word when there's news." Reluctantly, they obeyed, returning to the boarding house where the signs of Holderman's attack were still evident in the boarded windows and charred furniture. Mabel immediately set about making coffee and sandwiches for the men who had ridden with her to the rescue. "How did you know we needed help?" Sophia asked as she helped, desperate for distraction from her worry about Flynn. Mabel handed her a stack of plates. "When Flynn didn't return on schedule, I sent word to Marshal Cooper in Cheyenne. He arrived yesterday, just as one of Holderman's wounded men rode into town, bragging in the saloon about ambushing Flynn. We gathered every able-bodied man who had a grudge against Holderman, which was most of the town, and rode out at dawn." "Thank you," Sophia said fervently. "If you hadn't come when you did." Mabel squeezed her arm. "Flynn is lucky to have you. I've never seen a Philadelphia lady ride across Wyoming territory in trousers before." Sophia blushed. "I'm not much of a Philadelphia lady anymore." "No," Mabel agreed with approval. "You're becoming a Wyoming woman. Much better, in my opinion." The hours crawled by with no word from Dr. Wilson. Sophia tried to sleep, but found herself pacing the boarding house instead, pausing at each window to look toward the doctor's office, as if she could will Flynn to heal through sheer determination. It was nearly dawn when a knock came at the door. Sophia, who had been dozing in a chair by the fire, jerked awake. Mabel emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron, and opened the door to find Dr. Wilson standing there, looking exhausted. "How is he?" Mabel demanded. The doctor removed his spectacles and rubbed his eyes. "It was touch and go for a while. The infection was severe and he'd lost a lot of blood, but the fever broke about an hour ago. I think he'll pull through." Sophia felt her knees weaken with relief, and she gripped the back of a chair to stay upright. "Can we see him?" she asked. "Briefly, doctor." Wilson conceded. "He's still very weak and he needs rest, but he's been asking for you, Miss Sinclair." Sophia and Mabel followed the doctor through the quiet pre-dawn streets to his office. Inside, they found Flynn lying on a narrow bed, his face still pale but no longer flushed with fever. His eyes were closed, but they opened as Sophia approached, focusing on her face with an intensity that made her heart skip. "Sophia," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. She took his hand, alarmed at how thin and fragile it felt. "I'm here," she said, blinking back tears. "You're going to be all right." A hint of his familiar smile touched his lips. "Thanks to you. Riding across Wyoming to rescue a lawman, not what I expected from a Philadelphia banker's daughter." "I'm full of surprises," Sophia replied, returning his smile through her tears. Flynn's eyes drifted to Mabel, who stood at the foot of the bed. "And you," he said, "leading a posse. What would Father say?" "That I take after him," Mabel retorted, though her voice was thick with emotion. and that you need to be more careful, little brother." Flynn's eyes returned to Sophia, his grip tightening slightly on her hand. "Holderman in custody," Sophia assured him. "Marshal Cooper took him and his men to Cheyenne to await trial." Relief washed over Flynn's face. "And the land records, safe," Sophia said. "The ranch is officially mine." Flynn nodded, his eyes beginning to drift closed. "Good. We'll build something there together." The simple statement, delivered as he slipped back into sleep, sent a wave of emotion through Sophia. "We, together." Those words held more meaning, more promise than any formal declaration of intent could have. She looked up to find Mabel watching her with knowing eyes. "He means it, you know," Mabel said softly as they left Flynn to rest. "When Flynn makes a promise, he keeps it." "I know," Sophia replied, her heart full. "And so do I." The following weeks passed in a blur of activity. Flynn recovered slowly but steadily, moving from Dr. Wilson's office to a room at the boarding house where Sophia and Mabel could better care for him. As his strength returned, so did his determination to see Holderman brought to justice. The trial was held in Cheyenne, with Sophia, Flynn, and Sam all testifying about the ambush and the attack on the boarding house. Judge Carter, the honest jurist Flynn had mentioned, presided. When he delivered the verdict guilty on all counts, Sophia felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Holderman was sentenced to 15 years in the territorial prison, effectively ending his reign of terror over Fort Laramie. With the trial concluded, Sophia turned her attention to her newly secured ranch. She rode out with Flynn, who was still using a cane but insisted on accompanying her for her first visit to her property. The ranch was everything her father had described in his letter, a sprawling property with a small but solid house nestled on a hill overlooking a valley where a creek wound its way through lush grassland. The house had been neglected during Holderman's occupation, but its bones were good. As they stood on the porch, surveying the land that was now indisputably hers, Flynn slipped his arm around her waist. "What do you think?" he asked. "Is it what you hoped for?" Sophia leaned into his embrace, feeling the solid strength of him beside her. "It's more than I hoped for," she said truthfully. "When I left Philadelphia, I was simply following my father's last wish I never expected to find." She paused, searching for the right words. "A home," Flynn suggested. "Or something more." Sophia turned to face him, her heart in her eyes. "Both. I found both." Flynn's free hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch gentle but sure. "I've been thinking," he said, his gray eyes serious. "This ranch needs a lot of work. The house needs repairs, the fences need mending, and someone will have to oversee the cattle operation." "Are you offering your services, Marshal Owens?" Sophia asked, a smile playing at her lips, in a manner of speaking. Flynn set his cane against the porch railing and took both her hands in his. "I'm offering more than that, Sophia. I'm offering a partnership. A life together, building something that will last." Joy bubbled up within her, bright and effervescent. "Are you proposing, Flynn Owens?" "Inelegantly, perhaps," he admitted with a rueful smile. "But yes, I love you, Sophia Sinclair. I have since that day behind the water trough when you told me you weren't strong enough, and I saw the lie in your eyes. You're the strongest person I know, and I want to spend my life beside you." Tears of happiness blurred Sophia's vision. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you, Flynn Owens." His kiss was gentle at first, a tentative exploration that quickly deepened into something more profound, a promise, a commitment, a beginning. When they finally parted, breathless and laughing, Flynn rested his forehead against hers. "We'll have to tell Mabel," he said. "She'll be insufferable about being right all along." "Worth it," Sophia decided, stealing another kiss. They were married in Fort Laramie 3 weeks later, with Mabel as Sophia's matron of honor and Sam Reeves standing up for Flynn. The entire town turned out for the celebration, which spilled from the small church onto the main street and lasted well into the night. As evening fell, Flynn led Sophia away from the festivities to the quiet of the boarding house garden. "Happy?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist. Sophia nodded, leaning back against his chest. "Completely, though I'm a bit nervous about tomorrow." "The move to the ranch?" Flynn asked. "Don't be. We'll face whatever challenges come together." "I'm not worried about the challenges," Sophia admitted. "I'm worried about whether I can be what the ranch needs, what you need." Flynn turned her in his arms, his expression serious. "Sophia Owens," he said, using her new name for the first time. "Don't ever doubt your strength or your ability to meet whatever comes our way." "Remember what I told you that first day?" Sophia smiled, remembering. "You said I'd survived this long, hadn't I? That it took a kind of strength most men don't have." "And you've only grown stronger since then," Flynn said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "The ranch will thrive under your care. Our life together will be good, not always easy, but good." "How can you be so sure?" Sophia asked, though his certainty was already easing her doubts. Flynn smiled, the love in his eyes warming her to her core. "Because I know you, Sophia Owens, and that's enough." 5 years later, the sound of children's laughter drifted through the open windows of the ranch house, bringing a smile to Sophia's face as she kneaded bread dough on the kitchen table. Through the window, she could see Flynn chasing their 3-year-old son, Thomas, around the yard while their 5-year-old daughter, Elizabeth, rode her pony in careful circles within the corral. The ranch had flourished under their joint stewardship. The house had been expanded to accommodate their growing family, with wide verandas wrapping around 3 sides to catch the summer breezes. The cattle operation had grown steadily, and they'd added horses as well, Flynn's particular passion. But the true success was less tangible than buildings and livestock. It was in the community they'd built around them. Sam Reeves and his sons had become partners in the cattle operation. Mabel still ran the boarding house in town, but spent most weekends at the ranch, doting on her niece and nephew. Other small ranchers who had suffered under Holderman's regime now thrived, sharing water rights and grazing lands in a cooperative arrangement that Sophia had proposed, drawing on her father's banking knowledge. The door opened and Flynn entered, carrying a giggling Thomas upside down under one arm. "Delivery for you, madam," he announced, depositing their son on his feet. "Mama," Thomas exclaimed. "Papa showed me the new foal. She has a white star on her head, did he now?" Sophia smiled, wiping flour from her hands to accept her son's enthusiastic embrace. "And did you remember to stay back like Papa told you?" Thomas nodded solemnly. "Papa says horses need space when they have babies, just like people." Flynn shot her an amused look over their son's head. "He's a quick study." "Like his father," Sophia agreed, her hand unconsciously moving to rest on her slightly rounded belly, where their third child was just beginning to show. Flynn caught the gesture and crossed to her side, his hand covering hers. "How are you feeling?" he asked softly. "Well," Sophia assured him. "This one seems easier than Thomas was." "Good," Flynn murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple, "because Mabel will have my hide if you overdo it again." Sophia laughed, leaning into his embrace. "Your sister is more protective than a mother hen." "She loves you," Flynn said simply. "We all do." Sophia turned in his arms, looking up into the face that had become as familiar to her as her own. The years had added a few more lines around Flynn's eyes, a few more strands of silver at his temples, but his storm-gray eyes still regarded her with the same intensity, the same depth of feeling that had captivated her from the beginning. "I love you too," she said softly. "More than I ever thought possible." Flynn's smile was tender as he bent to kiss her, a gentle reminder of the passion they still shared. Not bad for a Philadelphia banker's daughter who once thought she wasn't strong enough, he teased when they parted. Sophia's laugh held all the joy, all the confidence she had found in their years together. "Well, I had a wise cowboy tell me I'd survived this long, hadn't I?" she replied, mimicking his deeper voice. "Turns out he was right about that, and about so many other things." Flynn gathered her close, his strong arms encircling her and their unborn child. "Best decision I ever made," he murmured against her hair, "believing in your strength even when you didn't." Through the window, they could see Elizabeth dismounting from her pony with all the dignity of a young lady twice her age, while Thomas had discovered a grasshopper and was following it with intense concentration across the yard. "We've built something good here," Sophia said, contentment warming her voice. "Something that will last." "Together," Flynn agreed, "just like I promised." As the Wyoming sun slanted golden across their land, Sophia knew that whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them with the same strength, the same determination, the same love that had brought them to this moment. A Philadelphia banker's daughter and a Wyoming marshal, bound together by a journey that had begun with her declaration of weakness and his recognition of her true strength. In the end, they had both been right. She hadn't been strong enough alone, but together they were unbreakable.